So the benefits are definitely the guaranteed money. Another huge benefit is they pay higher than higher market rent in a lot of areas. Programs like the veterans and other programs where people are disabled, they pay a lot higher.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, now offering a $250 per unit project allowance to new clients in West Michigan. Find out more at livegreenlocal.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 317. My guest today is a full-time chemical engineer turned real estate investor. Jhanel Wilson is also the founder and CEO of the Savvy REI. And today she's going to share her 18 years of hard lessons and personal strategies in building an 8-figure portfolio using government programs and credit cards. We're also going to discuss what it means to be a defensive investor and how to make your portfolio recession and pandemic proof. Jhanel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. 18 years investing in real estate. Sounds like you had a really good job. Give us a little sense of the trajectory of how you went from a full-time W-2 type job to a real estate investor.
I've always had an interest in math and science. And so I majored in chemical engineering. And when I got my job, I got a government job because my family, they're all in the government. I got aunts, uncles in the VA, the DEA, and I was in the USDA because we've always believed in security. I took my job at a salary of $38,000 at the time. My other counterparts were making like 65, around that number at Johnson & Johnson, other big companies. But number one, I stayed at home with my grandmother, so I didn't have to pay rent. And I just felt like I wanted to be close to home. So even though I was making less money, I liked the security of it. So I've always felt security in the government, which was probably what led me to working with the government programs, but we'll get into that later. But what started me in the real estate investing was my dad had a property on the same block as my grandmother and noticed that it was about to go for share sale and auction because he had abandoned it over 10 years ago and it was falling apart. And I had always planned on being a millionaire and being rich by the time I'm 65. I've always been a big saver. I put money in my 401k as soon as I got a chance and my Roth IRA. So I was already very savvy in finances and knowing that I should save. I've always been a big saver. But when I found out about this property, I decided to try and stop it and save it to see what the potentials were in it. So I got a student loan because I was still in my last year of college. I got a student loan and I used my credit cards and I paid off the back taxes. I stopped, it was going to get demolished by the city. I stopped all these things. And by the time I was about 10,000 into it, I didn't really know what to do. And I was going to sell it. And I got an offer for $45,000, $45,000. And I thought it was worth me about $25,000 because it was a total renovation. And the ceiling was falling down. The walls in the back were crumbling. So when he offered me that, it made me think for a second and I was like, maybe I should keep it. So if he had offered me $25,000, I would have sold it. My life would have been completely different. But since he saw the value, I decided I would hold on to it and figure out what he saw in the property. So as soon as I decided to keep it, my mom is a hairdresser and she had a client who came in and I was telling her the story, what's going on. She said, I have a house around the corner from there. I just refinanced it, did a drive-by appraisal, and I got a loan for about $65,000. And I was like, what? This is my answer. So I did exactly what she did. I got a home equity loan, did a drive-by appraisal. So I fixed up the outside of the house, put in new windows, new doors, painted, and it appraised for $70,000. But that house had all kinds of liens on it. It had mortgages, water bills, like all kinds of stuff. And I wound up paying $45,000 out of that home equity loan. So I had about 20 left over. I used that to fix it up. I had contractor drama, city drama, drama from the neighbors. But by the time I was finally finished, I put 2 tenants in there and I started cash flowing $700 a month immediately. That was through the Section 8 program. So it was automatic in my bank account. and I was cash flowing all this money. And I was like, this is what I need to do. Screw my government job. Like, I'm not going to max out anything anymore. I'm going to put all my money into real estate. So that was kind of how I got started, kind of got thrown into it.
That's a great story of going from one mindset, which is security. Work. You took a pay cut to work for the government when your peers were making twice as much almost working in the private sector. So security was very important to you, but then you just jumped ship into a much more what would be perceived risky venture of real estate investing. So talk about that mindset shift of going from that security set mindset to the profit mindset.
I felt like it was secure because it was guaranteed and it was still from the government. It just was out of a different pot.
The rent income was secure. You knew that it was coming from the government, so that was going to continue.
Yep. So I still felt the security of the guaranteed rent. And the tenants had their tuitions were $50 a piece, and they both paid it all the time. So I still felt secure in the first of the month payment, direct deposit in my account on the month. So I still felt the security. It was just a mindset of putting all my money into real estate instead of putting it into like the traditional stuff like 401ks and Roth. I mean, I was still doing that. I still had one foot into personal finance, and I was just confused and doing what I thought I should be doing. So I still put a lot of money into my 401ks and Roth, but I still put 100% of the rest of my money into real estate.
So it sounds like there really may not have been as much of a mindset shift because you're still receiving your income from the government to a large extent. And so talk about rent that's guaranteed by the government and what the programs are that you've tapped into and your experiences in that area.
I consider the government, there's like separate different types of people who rely on the government. There's people who rely on the government like almost completely to pay for their housing and their food and everything. Then there's people who work for the government as employees, and the government pays for salaries, their health insurance, their pension, all those types of things. And now I'm in the next part where I contract with the government and I do housing and they pay me through that. I have to do my own health insurance and everything. So in my section, there's like no cap on the amount that I can make. And my job as an employee, I was capped at like a GS7, what they call it, or GS11, I'm sorry. I started as GS7 and I ended as a GS11. I wouldn't be making six figures by now, which a lot of my engineer friends are. So I would have been capped a long time ago, but now that I'm in a different section of working with the government contracts, I get lots more money. And even though it is Section 8, it's still a contract with the government because I've also been exposed to other agencies because they see me listed in their program. They still reach out to me. So I reach out. So I'm actually with the government agencies and city agencies and all types of things like that. But because I contract with them and just provide housing, I still feel security in that. If the government fails, then we're in some other kind of mess. So I'm not really worried because I rely on the government.
So Jhanel, you mentioned a lot of different government programs just now. Aside from Section 8, I'm not sure I'm familiar with any of them. So can you kind of just break down for our listeners what the different government programs are that you're able to tap into?
Well, the biggest ones that I use are probably through Section 8 and the VASH program, which is working with veterans. So those are the biggest ones that I use. And then there's other ones. I don't like to make my accounting too difficult. So I don't want to work with a whole bunch of different ones. I have a bunch of different points of contact. So I just work with those two main ones, which is VASH and then the Section 8 program.
What does VASH stand for? Is it federal? Is it state? What is it?
It's Veteran Affairs Supportive Housing.
Is it very similar to Section 8 where you get the money from the Veteran Affairs?
Yeah, so they filter the money through Section 8, but most of your point of contacts is through the veteran program, and they give them a lot of support. So it's just to make sure that we get paid, and they funnel it through the Section 8 program.
Is it because you have a government background that you were able to kind of tap into these and find the right people? I mean, what would you say to listeners who want to provide housing for these organizations?
I think it's mostly because I understand the government and I understand the people who work with the government and I understand the contracts. A lot of stuff is paperwork and people don't like paperwork. So if you are good at paperwork, then you'll be fine with the government. They want a lot of paperwork. You got to be on top of your stuff and be organized. So as long as you have those qualities, you can definitely be in the program. But someone who's a slumlord or who doesn't really want to keep up with their stuff or their paperwork, you're not going to like the program.
And can you break down the pros and cons of working with Section 8 and VASH? What are the benefits of it? And then what are some of the drawbacks that you've experienced?
So the benefits are definitely the guaranteed money. Another huge benefit is they pay higher than higher market rent in a lot of areas. Programs like the veterans and other programs where people are disabled, they pay a lot higher, not a lot higher, but you might get $200 more a month for a veteran or someone who has a disability. So that's another, but you're paying, there's no free lunch. There will be some kind of drawback where you do have to do extra work to accommodate. They pay higher, the guaranteed rent. You have extra accountability because people who want to stay on the program, they pretty much will follow all the rules. So they're not paying their rent, you can tell Section 8, and then they'll go back and reinforce it with the tenant. They'll threaten to terminate their voucher, and then they'll start paying the rent. If they have an unauthorized occupant, you tell Section 8. So it's another layer of accountability that you have from working with the government. Only the biggest drawbacks are the inspections. And it all depends on the inspector. If you have an inspector who nitpicks, it's going to be frustrating. And you just have to make sure you have a good maintenance crew who is good at going through a punch list and who is they are detailed. If they pay attention to detail, and they know how to fix things instead of replacing, because it will cost you a lot of money if all you do is replace everything that gets broken. So that's how you kind of combat the inspection thing. And in our program, our inspections are every 2 years. So it's not even that bad. When it was every year, you felt like you had like 10 inspections a month. But now they're every other year, and they've gotten smarter, and they're doing them all. Like if you have properties in the same area, they'll do them all in that one day. So they're not all spread around. So it's been getting better, more efficient. The other issue is just dealing with the agencies in general. But once you get to know the people in it and you just work with the people, that gets easier too. So I think those are the biggest issues. People say that the tenants are the biggest issues, but you have to screen. So as long as you screen properly, you don't have a problem with the tenants. It's just people who don't want to take the time to screen. They're the ones who have a bad time with tenants.
When you're working with Section 8 or VASH, how do you screen your tenants? And how able are you to screen your tenants? Or do you have to accept, because they're Section 8 or VASH, you have to accept them anyway?
No, you don't have to accept anyone. First of all, there is such a high demand. You have your pick. Whenever I list a property for rent, I get 100 calls easily. So because the demand is so high, you can pretty much pick whoever you want because people just need a place to live. And I really prefer people who've been on the program for a while because they understand the program. They know they have to hand the paperwork. They know about the inspection. They know they need to be home. So those people are easier to work with, and they care about being on the program. So if they do something to break the lease, they'll make sure they get back in compliance. So that is one major thing, having someone who has been on the program for a while and understands it. Another big thing is I look for a tenant who has accountability and doesn't seem entitled. And I basically ask them questions about their previous landlord, ask them about their relationship with the previous landlord. And they say things like, oh, I've been with this landlord for 10 years. My kids, they've grown, so I need a smaller place. So I just look for things like that and not people who just blame everybody for everything. So once I hear them blaming everyone, always a victim, I don't take them as tenants because they're going to just be blaming me for the same stuff.
So let's talk a little bit about your portfolio, because you started, it sounds like, with your dad's property that you weren't really sure how you were going to proceed with it, and then realized, hey, if you rent it out under this program, you get guaranteed rent. And it sounds like the numbers worked out for you pretty well. Where did you go from there? Like, how did you build your portfolio? What type of properties are in it? And are you still building it?
So that was a duplex. And as soon as I got that rented out, I bought another duplex like a month later. And that one cash flowed about $900 a month. So I was like, so this is repeatable. And that's basically what I kept doing. After my second property, I moved out of my grandmother's and I got my own place, and I used an FHA loan for my second property and my third. And when I when I moved out, the income from my first two jobs covered my mortgage. It covered more than my mortgage. I had money still left over. And I still had my job income. I think I was making about $50,000 at this time. And I tried to get another house using the FHA loan. And they were like, no, because of the ratios and 70% this and that, you don't qualify for a loan. And I was like, how is that possible? Like, this house pays for my mortgage. I have this extra money still. I still have my job income. And you tell me I don't qualify for a house. So I had a bit of a roadblock of what to do, but I decided I would try another route and maybe do what they call subject to. And I would assume someone's mortgage. I would pay them something and, fix it up and rent it out like that. So my next property was that type of deal. I assumed a loan of a house. It was about $30,000 they owed on it. It was probably worth about $30,000. I paid them $1,000. And I got a credit card. I used a credit card to fix it up. I got approved for about $8,000, so that was my budget. And when I realized this mortgage was actually a subprime loan, it was from Countrywide. It had a 27% interest rate. Her payment was $300 a month, and only like $10 was going towards the principal. And I was like, oh my God, I could not keep this loan. So I tried to refinance, and I couldn't because, of the ratios. And I'm like, but it's rented out. Like, why can't I refinance? So I called a friend of mine who had taken this real estate class over the weekend. He paid $6,000 for it. I wanted to take it, but I didn't have the money. And I was like, how are people getting these loans for all these properties without a job or whatever? And he's like, they're getting commercial loans. And I never heard of it. And I looked online. He told me which bank they use. So I called the bank and they're like, yeah, you just have to cash flow this amount of money, blah, blah, blah. And boom, my new strategy appeared. I refinanced through TD Bank. The house paid for $70,000. I was able to pay back that loan and the card that I used to fix it up. And it was the burst strategy, basically. So I cashed out. I got about $30,000 in cash, and I had new money to go and buy more properties. And around about the time, I started to get kind of in a mix of the real estate world because of that loan and my friend who took the mentorship, and I got exposed to hard money lending. And that's kind of when things really changed.
Anyone who listens to this show knows that Green Property Management manages my entire West Michigan residential portfolio. They manage single families all the way up to large apartment complexes. Marty and his team are running a new special that I think is absolutely nuts. And I tried to tell him so, but he wouldn't listen to me. They want to offer new clients a $250 per unit project allowance to have their in-house licensed crew tackle any project, big or small, for new clients. I can tell you from personal experience that their unique management style will save you money, eliminate headaches, and increase your net operating income. You add on top of that this limited time offer of $250 per unit for new clients, and it really becomes a no-brainer. So text GREEN250 to 21000 or visit them on the web at livegreenlocal.com and tell Marty I think he's gone off the deep end with this absolutely nuts $250 offer. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. You kind of reached a roadblock where you were no longer able to just get single family loans. So you couldn't do the BRRRR and cash out and get your money back. But then it sounds like you did find a lender that was willing to do maybe a portfolio loan or a non-Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD-approved type loan. Is that what you found?
So I wasn't doing the BRRRR strategy on those other two properties. My money was still in there. I didn't know or hadn't realized about doing a refinance and getting my money back out. I didn't learn this until my fourth house and I got this commercial loan. So this commercial loan, it's even though it's called commercial loans, you can also get this on single family homes that are investment properties, as long as they are cash flowing. And they're mostly asset based. So it's a regular loan, but it's from the commercial side, and they have different rules, I guess I can say.
How repeatable and rapidly were you able to grow this portfolio?
I mean, once I found out about the commercial loans, and then I got hip to the credit card game, and a hard money lender is when it really took off. I mean, my limitation was always the money. I had access to deals. I had to drive. I didn't have my contractor yet. I met my contractor on my fifth house. But after I had my contractor, all my lenders lined up. That's pretty much when I quit my job. I realized I didn't need my job because all my loans were based on the properties and how they cash flowed.
Wow. So what was that feeling like to actually go quit your job? Because you were all about the security, that income, and then you up and quit your job. How did that feel?
Well, I still had security from my guaranteed rent. So I always felt security with that. My job money just became extra money. I started to put a whole lot of money into my 401k because I didn't really need it anymore. But I thought I needed my job to qualify for loans. So my job was really just to qualify me for loans. But before I left, I talked to the commercial lender and said, when I quit, if I quit, will you still finance me based off my current portfolio? And if I still continue to buy this way? And they said, yes, these are the properties, the types of properties that we finance. So yes. So I didn't want to quit my job, but we got to a point where this was during like the Great Recession. And the government had offered a buyout to all the older people who worked at my job. And when they offered the buyout, they started to dump a lot of work on me. And it got to a point where I couldn't comfortably do both. Really, I was tired. I would walk into my office at 7:30 in the morning. There'd be people in my office waiting to talk to me. I'm like, I don't play those games. I have accountability. I do all my work. I do everything quickly. I don't need you in my office checking on me. So when it got to that point, I was like, I guess this is time. I have to choose. And then I went to an auction where I got this huge package of 4 triplexes. And I was like, this is it. This is my sign to go. Because once I had them up and running, I'd be cash flowing a whole lot of money, plus my current stuff. And I was like, this is a sign that I should leave. I'm not happy at my job anymore. I got this great deal that will bring in all the money that my job is bringing me. So I was like, it's just time. So I felt good that things were like lining up, with the lenders and the deals. And it was just a sign that it was time for me to go.
Did you ever regret leaving your job?
There were times where you missed that 2-week paycheck. It probably took maybe about 2 years before I didn't miss it. And it was actually because I had a baby and I didn't realize how expensive kids were. So I kind of missed that money. But I was happy to not have to wake up and go to work either. So, and it just took a while to kind of get used to not having that money. So I had to take a step back because at that time when I left, I was getting almost 80 at my job. And my properties were cash flowing about 80. So I was making like $160,000. And, I was young and single at the time. I was buying clothes and going out for happy hour. I had a friend who was broke with no job. I would pay for all her stuff too. So I had to take a huge lifestyle change. And I've lived that life before, like being pretty frugal. So I've done it before, so I knew I could do it again. It just kind of hurt a little bit. So once I scaled back again to my lower salary, and then I had an extra responsibility of the kid, it was a lot, but it took about 2 years to get kind of up and running again. Then it took years later until I passed that 160 again. But it just takes time, and I understood that. I know as long as I hunkered down and worked like I know I can, it always pays off.
You mentioned buying 4 triplexes at an auction. How did you get introduced to the auction experience? And tell us how those 4 triplexes went for you.
So once I got in the network of the real estate investors in Philly, you kind of find out about all the auctions. This was an auction from the Housing Authority, actually, through the Section 8, because apparently they owned a lot of properties that they plan on fixing up and renting out to tenants, but they decided to sell them off to investors. So the package that I got, there were actually 2 duplexes and 2 triplexes. I got the package for $30,000, which was the cheapest package of the whole night. And it was towards the end because in auction, everyone has their money up front. And towards the end, people go home, they're tired, they spend their money. So stuff usually goes for cheap. But I didn't expect it to go for that cheap. But the project itself was very challenging. I had always prided myself on being resourceful and being able to get through anything. And my first property was like one of the toughest projects that I had. Like I said, it was the walls were coming down. It was my first time with a contractor. So I went through a lot with that property. And I really feel like it made me fearless to the point where I feel like I could take on anything. So when I did these 4, I actually had bought another one that was part of that block. So I was actually doing 5 at the same time. 5 of them, I had to put 3 I had to put in like a sprinkler system and do all these extra things because I was changing the amount of families in it. And it was very painful. It was like a learning curve that was a little too steep for me. And it took me a while. I had a lot of hard lessons. And probably the first project that I actually hated in a while. I still kind of hate going over there because I'm traumatized, but it was a lot. It was a bad area. I had people breaking in and stealing things all the time. They were like ripping security bars off the brick. And the people who I hired, because my budget was so small, because my lender, he didn't like the area. He didn't want to lend me the money. So he didn't give me enough budget. I asked for $700,000. He gave me $400,000. And to renovate 5 triplexes with $400,000, it is just not enough money. I did use my credit cards a lot. I finished 4, and then I got a loan from my fiance at the time to help me finish the 5th one. So it took me almost 2 years. It was very stressful, but I made it. Now they're worth so much more money, and I'm going to refinance in a couple months and probably take out maybe $200,000 or $300,000. So it always pays off. They cash flow pretty well. So even though it was very painful, it's worth it.
I want to ask you about using credit cards and some of the credit hacks that you've used in building your portfolio. Can you talk about that a little bit, please?
I discovered credit cards back in maybe 2009. I kept getting these balance transfer offers in the mail saying 0%, just put it in your bank account. So I called them. I said, what are these checks for? Is this like a cash advance? And they said, no, it's a balance transfer offer, but you can just put it in your bank. And I said, at 0% for a year. And they said, yes. So at the time, I had like a $20,000 limit on my Citibank card, and houses in Philly you can get back then for $15,000, $20,000. So what I started doing was I started buying properties using these cash advances using these balance transfer offers on my credit card. I bought 3 at the time, and I kept applying for new ones. I kept applying for higher limits. And when I finished fixing up the 3, I went to and got a commercial loan and refinanced them out. So I started a new strategy of buying houses with my credit card, fixing them up within a year, refinancing them, paying the cards off, and then I would have some additional money to pull out and use to buy another one. And then I started to pairing the credit cards at the down payment. I would use down payment, 0% offer down payment, paired with a hard money loan. I would use money from my credit card to start the construction and then pay myself back with the hard money loan. And then once I finished that again, I refinance and pay off the cards and pay off the hard money lender like that. So they are a pivotal part in my strategy because the 0%, you really can't beat it. It's very easy to get approved. I get line increases all the time. And you just got to make sure you get credit cards that have 0% balance transfer offers a lot.
So are you still employing that strategy?
Yes.
Do the credit cards look at your credit score and see, okay, you've got all these other credit cards taken out with different amounts of debt? Does that ever ding you when you try to get those cards?
So I don't apply when I have them maxed out. I know what the credit companies look for. And so I only apply when after I pay them off after refinance. And I already have like big lines with them. Like I have about $300,000 in credit card limits. And then I also have business lines of credit too. So I use both, but yeah, I definitely use them. I don't have any late payments. So as long as you don't have any late payments, you don't have collections or judgments, having a high limit, having a lot of like things on your credit report don't really matter. So yeah, people are trained to be a consumer, and consumers use credit cards to buy liabilities. They use it for spending. But if you're an investor, you use your debt to make money with. So I'm an investor. So if I have anything on my credit cards, it is because I'm investing with it. I don't use them for anything else.
That's a great distinction. You sound like Robert Kiyosaki.
His book's one of the first books I read, Cash Flow Quadrant. And I agree with like everything. And it just made everything make sense. I haven't read it since then, but I did listen to him on a podcast recently. I was like, man, I am just like Robert Kiyosaki. The only difference is I don't believe in precious metals or crypto. So that's just the only difference.
Talk about being a defensive investor, because that's one of the things in your bio. You're a defensive investor through the recession and pandemic. How do you position your portfolio to be defensive like that? And what does that really mean?
So it means that I don't speculate. I'm not a speculator. I don't buy anything that is determined is value based off appreciation. I buy things that are worth more than what I'm paying for. So if a lot of people can't see value, and they rely on other people were saying areas that are hot or they should invest here, and then they go and invest here. But that just means that the price is probably higher because it has high demand. So I invest in areas that have big buildings that I can add units or bedrooms to make them cash flow. And they cash flow high. So I buy based off of value and fundamentals, basically. And because of that, I feel like my portfolio is always safe. If the market has a downturn, it doesn't matter because I'm cash flowing. I'm also cash flowing from the government program, so it's guaranteed. And I don't participate in things that are in hot areas or should be the next new thing. So everyone's buying it up and it needs to appreciate in order to make sense. So that's what I consider being a defensive investor, just not participating in the next new hot thing.
Take us through the numbers on one of your typical deals, like what you might pay for it, how you might finance it, what you put into it, and then what you would expect to get out of it.
I have a lot of triplexes. I have about maybe 40 of them. And that is, I called on to the triplex game when I bought a triplex I bought and fixed it up and I put about 110,000 into it. In my mind, it was worth about 150, but because there were not a lot of triplexes that sold in my area, they had to take comps from the next like subdivision over. And so it appraised very high. It appraised for about $300,000. And that was like my first kind of turning point. And so I started to invest in a lot of triplexes because in my area where I invest, they're big, they're 1 and 2 bedrooms. With Section 8, I would get like $1,000 for each unit. And because they cash flow so well, the numbers just always made sense. And because people who were buying triplexes, because they weren't refinancing, they didn't know that they were appraising high. So my typical deal is like buying a triplex for 140 to 150. I would probably invest about 25,000 into it. And then they would appraise for like $250,000 to $300,000. So last 2020, I bought 4 triplexes. I bought them each for 150. I put about 100,000 into them total, and they appraised for 280. One appraised for 320. And then they cash flow about almost 40,000 a year. So those are my typical kind of deals.
Wow, you can't argue with those numbers. And I guess the unique niche you found was that these triplexes appraise a lot higher than what they were selling for.
Yeah, they still are.
What is your area? Where are you investing?
I'm in Philly, but like I said, I don't invest in hot areas. I invest in places that are I keep getting pushed further and further out as the places become popular. So I invest in Southwest. There's a lot of big houses out there that are on the main line. There's public transportation. It's close to the airport. It's close to downtown. It's close to everything. I don't know why no one buys there, but that's where I'm currently buying.
Where do you see your investing going now? I mean, you definitely found some really interesting niches. You've got a unique perspective on your market. Where do you take that?
Part of my huge team was my contractor. We've been working together for 10 years. I was pretty much buying stuff just to keep him and his crew busy. And it was so easy. I could buy a place, be like, go. He would just go in there and do his thing and I could keep it moving. But because of COVID and, we both had young kids, troubled marriage, he stopped working last year and it put me in such a bind. I have bought 8 properties for him to work on. And because of that, I've been going through the contractor struggle. So after I finish these 8, I'm taking a break, a much needed break. And I'm going to just focus on teaching people real estate investing. A lot of people are asking me questions and I really would love to help them because there's so many misconceptions out there that I feel like I need to clear up. So once I finish that, I'm taking a break. I'm going to help people. And then a couple years after that, if my properties appreciate, I'll probably get a nice refinance, pull out a few $100,000, maybe buy a big multifamily 50 unit or something.
Tell us how people can get a hold of you, find out more about you, and also the type of teaching or training that you offer.
I'm teaching buy and hold real estate investing, which I think is the most challenging, especially with the BRRRR strategy. I teach you how to vet contractors, how to deal with tenants, all those things, and the money that's involved in it. Because real estate investing is really a business. It's not passive. People think you can just hire this person, that person, and they go perfectly. No, it doesn't work like that. It's a business. You got to keep track of everything. So I'm teaching people buy and hold real estate investing, how to run like a business, how to know the numbers, how to know something's a good deal. And you can pretty much find me on Instagram. I don't have everything together like my website. I have a website, but it's not really that great because I'm still working in real estate investing. So I haven't had time to focus on that. But you can find me on Instagram at Jhanel Wilson, Jhanel Wilson, Wilson. And I teach about commercial financing, hard money loans, tenants, contractors. I talk about my dramas, my struggles, and how I get through things. So it's people, I think people will like it, I think.
And I want to thank you, Jhanel, for having this conversation with us. It's been really interesting learning about how you got started buying your dad's property and just the discoveries that you kind of made with working with government programs to guarantee that income, recession and pandemic proofing your properties, and the way you're utilizing credit cards, hard money, and even appraisals to really grow your portfolio and build value. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, now offering a $250 per unit project allowance to new clients in West Michigan. Find out more at livegreenlocal.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.